Welcome to Cloud and Clear, the podcast by SADA for innovative business leaders and technology enthusiasts, where we explore how Google Cloud is transforming the industry and what that means to you. Now, here's your host, Miles Ward.
Hi, everybody. My name is Miles Ward, and this is Cloud and Clear. I am your host, the CTO at SADA Systems, but generally the bad decision maker in charge of interviewing far, far smarter folks than myself to walk through and digest and unpack and kind of better understand what in the heck is going on with cloud. Where is this all going? What are we going to get done with? And I thought no better person to talk to. Okay, maybe there's like, if we could get
there are certainly better people to talk to,
that I can't actually do that intro. But there is a great person to talk to. His name is Daniel. He's, in the top 500 or 6. I'm screwing with you. So, Daniel, maybe give an introduction to our audience. Say howdy. Let them know who you are. You're going to do a better job at it than me then anyway.
Sure. So my name's Daniel Mintz. I am Looker's Chief Data Evangelist.
Oh, yeah.
I had to fight for that title. Looker is, I believe, the biggest company that Google Cloud has acquired. So we are now a happy member of the Google Cloud family as of February or March. And, getting settled into that in the midst of all of this craziness has been pretty amazing. But we've been around providing an analytics platform for our customers for, I don't know, since 2012, 2013. And now really excited to do that inside the Google Cloud family.
Oh, that's rad. Analytics platform. That sounds fancy. Tell me more.
Yeah. I mean, basically the idea of Looker is you have a lot of data because every company, anybody that runs any business has a lot of data, and you're probably not getting as much value from that data as you want to be. That it's rare. Perhaps never have I met someone who's like, oh yeah, totally. No, lots of data and so much value. Cannot tell you how much value I'm getting from my data. Every last bit of data, I am just wringing every piece of value out of it. No, that doesn't happen. So the basic sort of thesis that brought Looker about is like, there's tons of data. It lives in databases and data engines and data lakes and data whatevers that are getting incredibly fast, incredibly cheap, incredibly powerful. And we should be able to query that data, and we should be able to do that without having to wait for the overburdened analysts at our company to help us do that, right? We should be able to go into some kind of interface that knows all of the business metrics that I use to run my business, not generic business metrics, but the ones that make sense to me, and lets me ask business questions of the data and get reliable answers back quickly. That's what Looker's all about.
That sounds like hot magic. I have spent a bunch of cycles working in the salt mines of making those things that it stands on top of faster. But you said something in there that I wanted to unpack, like data. Data means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And it's true that there, is data in a whole bunch of different places. But like, how big is too big? What kind of data is the wrong data? Like, how do I get to that value at the far end?
The reality is that except for weirdos like me, nobody actually wants data. Like, I want data because I like playing with data, but that's because I'm a weirdo. most normal people don't actually want data. Not interested. You go, look at this data. They go, I have other things to do. Sorry, I gotta go. That's not what they want. What they want is they want answers to their questions. They want information. They want to be able to do their job better, right? And their job is not data. Their job is whatever their job is, whether that's they're a marketer or a salesperson or in ops or finance or, or product. Like, they have a job. And if you can give them answers to their questions with data that lets them do that job better, they are going to eat that up. They love that. If, on the other hand, you go, yeah, I have a long list, I have a backlog, so I can get you an answer to that, late next week. And they're like, well, I have to make the decision this afternoon, so I'm just going to go with my gut, right? Like, that's the norm. That's how most businesses end up working, because there is this giant backlog for the data analysts. And so we see the data analysts as a backlog and a bottleneck. And frankly, they don't like that. The data analysts hate it, right? It's not fun for them to be the bottleneck. And the business people who want information don't like it because they don't like waiting in line. So the idea of Looker is, how do you get all of that knowledge about what your data means and how it's structured and how to access it out of analysts' heads where it's locked away and only accessible, after waiting in line, and into a piece of software that can, democratize it and give wide access, but do so in a way that's governed, right? That doesn't create chaos. People, because they're sick of waiting in line, they say, "Oh, I know you're busy. Can you actually just like go into the data warehouse and slice off like a chunk of the data, and then I'll take it and I'll do the analysis. I'll load it into, into Excel, basically, to Excel,
Mhm.
and I'll or something like it, and I'll do the analysis." Which seems like a good idea, because now at least you're not waiting in line for the data analyst. The problem is, you've got chaos then.
Mhm.
Each person then has to figure out, how do I transform this raw material, this raw data as it came out of the database, into the business metrics that drive my business. And what you end up with is 15 different definitions of customer, and
Mhm.
6 different definitions of account, and lifetime customer value defined in completely different ways. And so it's great and fine when you're doing your own analysis. It's not so great or not so fine when you get into the meeting with the other departments and each of them have done the exact same thing. And you go, "Hey, well, sales are through the roof this month." And, marketing goes, "We're showing that they're going down." And finance says, "Well, actually, we see them as flat." And then you like spend the whole meeting and the next week trying to figure out whose data is right, where was it extracted from, when was it extracted, who, like, instead of just trying to actually make strategy and figure out what you do next. Those are the problems that Looker is trying to solve.
I feel like you've set up this hero arc for me, right? Like I can see the sort of shining city on the hill where we're
Yes.
all going to go and we don't have a bunch of chaos. Let's talk Daniel for a little bit. Like, you are the chief data evangelist. Like, it seems like you're like literally King Arthur, like running through with the big sword, and you've got like Carmina Burana banging in the background. How did you get here to
How
be
did I get
doing
here?
that? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, ass backwards, as most people land
Yeah.
places, and with a ton of like luck and privilege to go along with that. I started in electronic music, as most
Mhm.
data analysts do.
Yeah.
Um, that's what my master's is in, more or less.
Mhm.
Um, but also, while I was getting a master's in electronic music, I was working in politics, because that's a normal thing, right? Politics,
Mhm.
data analytics, and electronic music.
For
And
for for our audience, smart people get bored from time to time. Just throwing it out there.
or just can't figure out what they want to do with their lives. So working in politics, I work for an organization called MoveOn.org, which
Yeah.
is, for folks in the US, you may be familiar with it. It's a very giant, sort of all online advocacy group that's been around since 1998. But the key thing to know about MoveOn.org is it is fundamentally just a database. Like, at the end of the day, that's what MoveOn is. It's like 30 staffers and 8 million members. And so the way that the 30 staffers figure out what the 8 million members actually want to do, because it doesn't matter if the 30 staffers are like, "We're going to go run this ad." Like, the 30 staffers don't have any power. It's only by
Mhm.
saying, "We want to run this ad. Will you chip in?" And then, you know, 10,000 people chip in. And now all of a sudden you can run this ad. The only way that those 30 staffers can figure that out is by looking at data, right? They send out surveys, they do phone calls, they do all this stuff, and they collect the data into a database. And so working at MoveOn, I was like, well, how do I, I asked my colleagues, I was like, well, how do I, get the information I need? And they were like, you write
Mhm.
SQL. And I was like, what's SQL? And they were like, oh, you have a lot to learn. So I learned
Oh,
SQL.
Padawan, come to
Yeah.
me. Come to me to the select statement. Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I learned SQL. I learned MySQL, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing. I can
Mhm.
just type some crazy weird words into the computer, and I can know anything. This is
Mhm.
magic. Everyone should learn SQL." Oh, I was so young and dumb. Um, but I
No,
thought it
you
was
you
amazing.
weren't wrong. It is amazing, and
It
everybody
is
should
amazing.
learn SQL. Yes.
I was wrong about the everybody should learn it part. But I I did that for a long time. And then I went and I worked with some friends from Move On who had started a media company called Upworthy. and I started building their data analytics stack from scratch. And that was right at the beginning of 2013. So Amazon Redshift had just come out. It was the first like major entrant into the cloud data warehouse space. And I was sort of trying to figure out like, okay, the data will be in the database, but like I'm working with a bunch of writers and editors and they're not going to learn SQL. I sort of figured that out by now. And so I was like, well, what am I going to put on top of Redshift to get data into normal people's hands? And one of our early investors was like, hey, I have this friend. He just started a company out in Santa Cruz, California. You should talk to him. I think you might find him interesting. So I was like, all right, whatever. So I hopped on the phone with these folks from this company called Looker, and they said, let us connect to your database, and then you can ask us anything. And I said, man, I hate vendors with their ridiculous claims, and I'm just going to love watching you fall on your face. So yeah, let's connect to my database. So I connect to the database, and Lloyd, who was the founder, is the founder and was the only sales engineer at that point. He connects to the database, and he goes, okay, ask me anything. And I go, well, okay, show me this. And he goes, boop, boop, boop. And he shows me it. And I go, okay, well, that was an easy one. Let's do a harder one. How about this? And he goes, boop, boop, boop. And he answers my question. And he goes, but have you thought about slicing the data this way? And then he slices the data in a way that whose data it was, had never thought about. And I was like, what is this black magic? Like, I need this thing. I don't know what it is, but I need it. And what it was fundamentally, it was like, the answer was not everyone should learn SQL. The answer was a machine should learn SQL, and it should take the knowledge that the analysts in the company have about how to write SQL that is appropriate for that company, and it should put that in software. And then everybody should be able to use that software. And that's Looker. And so I used Looker. We bought Looker. We were like customer number 22 or something. And we used Looker for 3.5 years. And then eventually I jumped over the fence, and Lloyd was like, come help us tell the world about why this is awesome. And I was like, it's kind of awesome. I don't really want to sell software, but I do want to sell Looker. So, okay, yeah, let's do it.
I love it. I love it. I will call on the mat your story for exactly one detail.
Okay.
I was at Amazon when we launched Redshift, and I liked it. And I remember the sort of hairy negotiations with getting Parexel to hand over the code for all of that. We did that in prompt retaliation to the 2.5 years earlier launch of BigQuery.
I know, but it was still this weird. BigQuery is amazing, and I love BigQuery, but it was still this like weird stepchild that didn't really. I think I would have to go back to the audio tape, but I think that I said it was the first big launch of a cloud. So
yes, Google was intensely like. I keep grabbing. So Jordan Tagani was one of the founding team members. He and I are buddies, and I'm always giving him shit about this. I'm like, why where are the TV ads for BigQuery? Right? Like we just got done with a test project, right? Like everybody runs Hadoop. Hadoop's everywhere. Hadoop's great. You get a big scaled thing. Fine. Be my guest. Don't care. We move their Hadoop onto from the Amazon system over to the Google system. Yes, it's 7.48 or some silly number % faster and cheaper. Yay. High five. It'll be working. We just take those same queries, same data, stuff in BigQuery, 99 times faster, my friends. Like times faster. Times. So when a business, has questions, when I heard that they were starting to look through this purchase, it gave me like very strong peanut butter and jelly vibes, right?
Oh,
like
totally.
you have the ability to ask questions at totally absurd scales, no problem. Motorola was doing, I don't know how many active petabytes under query load constantly, but not everybody did the homework and learned SQL, right? And one of the questions that I've gotten, putting my evangelist hat on, because I think this is stuff where there's a lot of room to get better. Like, not only should not everyone learn SQL, I suspect there's like another layer of value where, how many people don't know array function in Excel, and so just don't, and end up recreating the majority of the behavior of array function through God knows what, buried around a whole nested set of VLOOKUPs and just terror. So your experience where he sliced the data a different way and you had just never seen it that way, like, I'm trying to figure out how to compress down those experiences more narrowly. Like on our side, customers go like, hey, I don't know if I want to sign up for this reseller thing. It seems like it's going to be a big paperwork pain in the neck. So we play back the 16-second long video where you change a 24-digit number, become a customer, and then change it back and cease to be a customer, right? Like, so it's not a pain. See, easy. And they go, oh, well, that's just much better. Like, which 17-second videos are missing from Looker today?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that that both Excel and raw SQL have wrong with them is that they are not code. And again, not that everyone should go learn to code, though you're welcome to. It's fun and exciting and interesting if that's the kind of person you are. So not against people learning to code, but they shouldn't have to. But the thing is that because it's not code and it's not repeatable and it's not reproducible, you can't get from A to B really fast because you can't leverage the work that everyone has already done, right? The brilliant insight that Lloyd had was that SQL is amazing and powerful and not going anywhere, but there are a bunch of rough edges. And if we can sand those rough edges off and make it reproducible, make it reusable, make it collaborative, make it version controlled, make it organized, make it all of those things, then that opens up enormous new possibilities. And so like one example of that is, we have what we call Looker blocks, which are fundamentally just a bunch of code, but it's LookML, which is the modeling language in Looker, the thing that actually lets analysts get their knowledge about what the data means out of their heads. And every business under the sun has Salesforce or some other CRM, right? And so if you come to us with Salesforce data, if you've ever looked at the ERD, the schema of the data in Salesforce, it is gnarly. It is huge. And no company uses more than like 30% of it, right? It's just this massive thing, and you're only using a tiny fraction of it. And so people are
Byzantine is the word I've heard used.
Yeah. And they're like, well, I got my data out of Salesforce, so now I want to start using it. I want to ask questions of the data. And it's like, well, great. But if you start with that raw Byzantine schema, first thing you have to do is like figure out how does all this stuff fit together. And Looker can write LookML once that knows how to do all that stuff, that has pre-built dashboards, that does all that, but it's still code. So because every single person's Salesforce implementation is like slightly different, right? Oh yeah, we added this custom field, and if you don't exclude the ones where that custom field is C, then you're going to get completely wrong numbers. It's like, okay, well, because it's just code, you can still go in and go like, oh, but let me tell you about this custom field that we added in Salesforce, or this custom object. And so that ability to pre-do a lot of the work and then just accelerate people and send them off to the races is, I think, one of the things that we're really investing in heavily at Looker, and that makes for really awesome 17-second videos, because it's just like, oh yeah, you have Salesforce data. Now you have Salesforce dashboards. Now start asking questions.
Yeah, that's hot. I mean, there's just a lot where, we, like get to the good part is the label. One of the buddies of mine's using a bunch, where it's like, there's so much boilerplate and repetition and, I got to start at the top and work through step 416. Like, so I think
like, again,
oh God, I can't do it. I'm going to go back. Right. So that I think is a super fun, dance move to be going through and looking at kind of a per product that you ingest from as an output. And one of the things we're thinking a lot about is it's kind of the opposite of that problem, right? Like there are a whole bunch of existing pieces of SaaS software, existing configurations of relational databases that are meant for the interfaces with other kinds of software applications. All of that stuff, the kind of this existing structure, the topography of the planet's funky data, right? And uh, in the same way, like I thought it was the sort of master stroke on the Google side when they launched GCS to emulate the S3 API, right? Like, don't come up with another API. Just use that one. It works great. Like, I imagine if I were going to be, tomorrow I'm going to start a brand new shiny CRM company. It's going to be amazing. Why arrive on my own output schema when I can just output Salesforce, right? Like,
Yep.
isn't every API a document template, for lack of better sort of phrasing or labeling? And so what we're trying to think through is, especially for all the companies that are starting, we're working a lot with companies that are starting to build software or moving from like augmenting software to seriously, okay, look, we have to build a bunch of software
Mhm.
internally. And we get the question back that's kind of the opposite. Like, I know the raw crappy data that my logs spit out. Like what should our schema be to feed in to make it so that Looker would make sense of it, like it makes sense of everything else? Any kind of views to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with software engineers, I'll start a fight. The problem with software engineers. Now, I mean, I'm a data analyst, so like I'm on the opposite side of this. But like, I think
Exactly.
the well, let's start where the problem really lies. The problem with business people is that they say, I don't know what we need to track, so just track everything. And software engineers are like, all right, okay, I'll just track everything. And then they dump this pile of junk in the analyst's lap and they say, make something of this. And like that entire process is backwards. The way that it has to go, and what I would tell anyone who's starting up a software business is don't start with the logs. Logs are important for, telemetry and understanding why stuff is breaking and all of that. Don't start there. Start with what are the things we want to know about how our software is working, right? What are the important things to know? Let's get a list of 10 of those. Now, in order to answer those questions, what are the things that we need to track and how should we track them, right? And if you do that, A, you actually can answer those questions, and B, the answers to those questions aren't buried in a pile of junk. So it's so much easier to work with them, right? And you don't like look, Salesforce is an amazing technology, but like the amount of cruft that lives in there because it can do everything is enormous. If you're starting from scratch, one of the benefits you have is focus, and you're not trying to do everything. So don't worry about tracking everything. Worry about tracking the metrics that matter, that are going to be able to answer the business questions that you actually care about.
Yeah, the metaphor that I heard from one of my developer buddies that I thought was perfect is dimensional lumber. It's like your house is made out of wood and my house is made out of wood too. And
Yeah.
it is absolutely possible that we could have bought trees and chopped them up. And we could have even all decided to buy trees and chop them up into rectangular pieces. But if we don't all agree that those
Yeah.
pieces are 2 inches by 4 inches, which really isn't 2 inches by 4 inches,
No,
a
it's not.
variety
It's
of
1.5 inches by, but the
whatever,
8 feet
right?
part is real. It's
But
very confusing.
it's right, and it's like the perfect example of what's broken in people's data, right? Is
Yeah, exactly. It's that two
convention.
by fours are 1.5
Two by
inches.
fours are not 2 inches thick, right? And that kind of like the 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 convention as placeholder for actual digits and how you have to sort of archaeolize. Not That's not really a word. It's like I want archaeology, but in the active
But
tense.
yes. Yeah, but I think actually that's where Looker comes in though, right? Is to that your data is dirty and you know how your data is dirty. And the reality is data is always going to be dirty. There's no perfect clean data. And so knowing that that data is going to be dirty and that 2 by 4 actually means 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches, which is nuts.
Nuts.
You can put that into LookML and say like, yeah. They're going to type in 2 by 4 because they're normal people and that's what we call it. But when you calculate the weight of that piece of wood, please know that its volume needs to be calculated with 1.5 by 3.5, right? And that is not something that a normal person should have to keep track of, right? The software should keep track of it because it's always true. And so, I think that converting the sort of business logic into the very precise, specific details that the database needs is what Looker is really good at, because we don't live in a world where we pretend, yes, the data is going to be pristine, and yes, we're going to go talk to the mill and make sure that they actually make 2x4s 2x4, because we just know that that's not going to happen. So we just got to deal with the world as it is.
Yeah, there, and I had a question about that's kind of a part of that, right? I was excited about the Looker acquisition because I thought for the things that, whatever Google did well, and that the open source technology that Google had been contributing to did well, that if there was a clear example of a pragmatic interface, of a place where I don't care about any of the underlying crap. I just have this question and I would like an answer. And I thought that so much more clearly reflected the reality of the vast majority of the problems that can be solved by these kinds of tools, that I hoped it would be inspirational for the rest of Google product management, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
some of these things are sort of obtuse for no good reason. Could we make them like a little more pragmatic, please?
Yeah, I mean, Googlers are not normal. I've been there for 5 months now, and they're not
I
normal.
appreciate the characterization.
And I don't mean that in a mean way or anything. They're just not like representative of a business manager of a, auto parts supply business in Chicago.
Yeah.
I feel like that was probably Tommy Boy that I'm probably referencing, subconsciously there. But they're not. I wrote a blog post about this when I first came to Looker. I don't even remember what sparked it, but it was just called "You're Not Normal." And we as humans have this problem, which is that we can only see the world through our own eyes, and we have this very, very bad habit of assuming that we are representative of everyone else's experience, and we're not. And so acknowledging that and remembering that the vast majority of companies out there have very different experiences and very different, capabilities and focuses than, your average Google engineer, your average Google product manager, is really important. And I think, I think that is like, as Google, takes part in the cloud wars, I think, that is a really important thing for them to embrace, for us to embrace, right? That the goal here is to serve the huge number of companies that are out there that want to be successful with technology. And sometimes that is about, like, let me talk to you about how many cores and how much memory. But sometimes it's, here's the business problem that I want to solve. Help me do that as efficiently as possible. I don't care what the hardware is. I don't care how it's done. Just help me solve the business problem. And I think we're seeing that, inside Google, there are just, talking to product managers and folks who are building these amazing solutions across Google, like they are definitely tackling that head on. But I think that's where the real value for businesses is.
Yeah, I mean, from where we were, right? Like I was in a meeting. Astrid Atkinson, who built Band-Aid, the entire global front end, like all traffic into all of Alphabet flows through her code, right? Like, okay. And I'm saying, look, we're going to need identity and access management. Like, I really promise this is kind of an important thing. And they're like, oh, but there are all these workloads and we need that. We got to have better priorities than that. I'm like, no, stop. Don't, fingers in the ears. Trust me, I'm telling you. So, in that meeting, her advice to me was, we shouldn't call it enterprise. That really freaks out a lot of our developers. Let's call it large organization basics. And I said, that sounds great. So large organization basics was formed. And as a result, GCP has identity and access management and integration with Active Directory and, works.
Yeah.
So that part, the pragmatic grasp on, getting from, what Spotify called weapons grade componentry, but still components.
Yeah.
Into
parts.
Yeah, into cool solutions where, I've watched a bunch of people stitch together. I use Flume as our output system on, and then we roll all of that into Kafka because that's what I like. But then I've got a commercial thing in Informatica to get that plumbed into an Oracle database, and then I stuff it out of that to go visualize through Tableau. But these other charts, I don't do them in Tableau. I've rewritten those in D3 because I've got my shit together and like, oh, okay, like I I
If you're
feel
doing
fear.
that, you're not normal.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
that is
right.
the mark of a non-normal person. And that's okay. Those people are incredibly valuable and they blaze the trail for the rest of us. But at
Mm,
the end of the day, like normal people just want the problem solved.
yeah.
And th- they don't want to do all that stitching. And I think like part of it is just by virtue of being a startup or what was a startup and building a business, Looker, we didn't have the luxury of not solving people's problems, right? We couldn't chase stuff just because it was interesting and great technology. We had to solve people's problems because if we didn't, they wouldn't pay us and then we'd
Mhm,
go out of business. And
mhm.
I think, I think that that is a really powerful motivator that keeps you on task and says like, yeah, no, we're not going to chase the interesting problems. We're going to chase the ones that are actually solving people's problems where they say, this is great. I will pay you money this year and I will pay you money next year and I will pay you money the year after that. It's like, yeah, that's great. And I think, I think the SaaS model in general also just aligns incentives really nicely because, it wasn't only our incentive to sell customers the thing. It was our very strong incentive to make sure that they were incredibly successful with it because if they weren't, they wouldn't renew. And so,
Yeah.
I think the change from the enterprise, license model where it's like, oh yeah, you buy the thing, and it costs $1 million and then you just pay maintenance. So you're like kind of locked in but you kind of hate it because it doesn't really work to the SaaS model. I think that's all to the good. I think that helps everybody.
Yeah, I am a giant fan of that model. Uh I also recognize how complicated business buyers are and how much flexibility they need in that structure. But the root in the center of it, which is I want to see value every month, so I'm going to write a check every month, and this is the sort of the linear relationship there. I think is a superpower, and it's better generally in SaaS than it is in things like infrastructure components because you can have this totally nonlinear relationship between the cost of components and the value they deliver. Where with SaaS, it's kind of like your problem. You have to figure out how to deal with all the crap that's cost of components
We're
and make
paying
it
you
to
how
this.
much a month?
Yeah, yeah,
And nobody's using you?
yeah,
Yeah, no, we're gonna cancel at the end of
yeah.
this year. One of the interesting things is to your point about business buyers, turns out they're like whole people, like they're human beings and they have feelings and motivations and desires and all of those things. Not only that, but some of them are actually kind of bad at selling you internally. And so part of your job as a SaaS company is not only making people successful, but helping the sort of owners and champions of your product sell internally and show value internally, right? So that when the CFO says you're paying them how much, what did they do for you? The person isn't like, they well, we use them for our data. They're like, "Oh, yeah, no, well, remember the outage last week? We got on that 6 hours faster because we were getting alerts from Looker, so that saved us, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and also it's the thing that's waiting for you every morning, in your inbox, and also it's this, and it's this, and this, and it's this." It's like, yeah, we need to equip those people to be able to sell that value internally so that we can make the case for, to everybody in the business that we are providing hopefully a lot more value than they're paying us.
I think the businesses I don't understand why it's not a more a clearer calculus in the VC world or in the funder world where Tim O'Reilly says it the clearest, like create more value than you capture is the only path forward in this thing. And it's so obvious when you see products that behave that way, and it's so obvious when you see products that do not behave in that way. So the maybe kind of as a last direction in this thing, the um for customers, right? Like we were early experimenters. We ended up building together with Looker this thing called the National Response Portal, which is super fascinating. I think it's my kind of first experience with with sort of production outputs as a first party user, not helping
Yep.
other customers be effective with it, but having to be effective with it ourselves. And we had the most sort of ludicrous, incredible onboarding possible, right? It was like a whole bunch of internal Looker engineers are in our chat thread, and we're all over engaging with you because we're all on this kind of mad rush to build something useful. How should folks get started?
Yeah.
What are the first things they should take a look at? How do they get to a first step?
Yeah, I mean, I think the the they should not have a ludicrous use case like SADA's. And I think obviously we're all adapting to this new world and some very unusual requirements, and that's great and fine. But yeah, I mean, most companies when they come to us with a desire to get more value from their data, and that should hopefully zero in on one or two places where that you have something valuable, where there's gold in them there hills, and you want to go mine it. And the way that Looker has sold for its entirety, the entirety of our history, is by doing trials, by doing a free trial and saying, this isn't a piece of software that you just download and play with, because it's a complicated piece of software that takes a little bit of expertise to implement, but it only takes a little bit. And so we want to spend 3 weeks working alongside of you and co-developing some LookML with you, so that at the end of 3 weeks you actually have value, right? You're like, oh, I can answer questions that I couldn't answer before. And so that is the way that we've always sold. It makes some people, like, it shocks some people. They're like, wait, you just like if I have data, you'll do a free trial? It's like, yeah, if you have a valid use case and you're excited about getting more value, we're going to sit down with you and actually prove out, right? Do a POC. And we've just found that in those 3 weeks we can quite often show you the value, right? And unlock that value. And so I think, to use one of those Silicon Valley terms that I just hate, we try not to boil the ocean in those.
Hey,
Like, it's and drink. It's not about solving every one of your data problems in 3 weeks. It's about saying, where's there information that we can't currently access or we can't get in the right hands at the right time, and how do we solve that problem and provide business value? And then once that's done, then we'll tackle the next, and then we'll tackle the next, right? It's an agile sort of incremental process of building up value. And one of the really nice things about the way that Looker works is that, if you take your marketing data and you say, my God, we spend so much on ads, really would be great to understand which of them is working and which isn't. And so you model your marketing data, and that's the first thing you tackle. When the next thing you tackle is your sales data, you can join up your marketing data without having to redo any of that work, right? And so
yep.
all of the knowledge that the marketing analyst has about what the marketing data actually means now can just be joined up with all of the knowledge that the sales analyst has about what the sales data means. And so now you can say, well, yes, the click-through rate on these ads is really great, but it turns out that when you follow them all the way down the funnel, they only buy once because they were just interested in the coupon, and they don't become repeat buyers. And now we can see that whole part. And then you connect that up with your Zendesk data. And so now you're like, oh, and now we can see that the people who come in on this have a much higher support load. And so, right. And you just, like, you start to build this world where you actually can see everything that's happening in your business. And it's not an instantaneous thing. It's a thing that takes investment, but it's an investment that pays enormous, enormous dividends.
I think that's exactly right. That's what we're seeing in practice, and I appreciate you helping people think through the stepwise approach. We live in the real world full time, and every customer wants something that they can pull the trigger on fast. And I'm going to get a result next week. I got a thing coming. I got to get this done. But it is the correct and real world way of saying, no, we're going to take some time, and we're going to work together, and we're going to build something that you can stand on the shoulders of, that can stand on the shoulders of, that can stand on the shoulders of, and accrete value over time. Sort of the Katamari Damacy of data value, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the bane of all data analysts' existence is that, we never know whether that one-off analysis we did is gonna be a one-off analysis or the thing that, like, drives our business for the next 6 years. And so we're just really terrible, every last one of us, at, like, building sustainable, reproducible things because we're like, this is a one-off. And then you, like, go look at a data analyst desktop, and it's like SQL.final.sql, and then it's like really final.sql. No, really this time final.sql, right? That's our world. And so, like, for us, Looker, us data analysts, like, Looker is just a breath of fresh air because all of those, I hate to give you software developers kudos, but all of the brilliant ideas that you all had about, like, organizing code and version controlling it and, making it collaborative and dry and all of that good stuff. Looker we stole all those ideas and we put them into data analysis because somehow they never migrated. And so we were stuck in the dark ages of, like, we write 400-line SQL statements, and then next week I can't even read my own stuff because it's just impenetrable. That's the world that many data analysts still live in, and Looker said, we can do better. Let's steal the software developers' ideas.
to go first full circle to where you started, I finally started shoving some of my music production work into Git, and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. I don't lose track of shit quite so bad. And maybe maybe we can get somebody on the floor of Congress to use source control just to sort of track changes and diffs and all that sort of good stuff.
Right. It would be amazing. Yeah, no, it is a really, whoever figured out source control, kudos to you, sir. You did a really good thing back in 1968 or whenever it was.
Well, look, this was super productive. I appreciate you taking the cycles. Any last bits you want to yell at people before I sign us off?
Don't settle for piles of data that you're not using. It's really a waste, and there are just huge insights in there that you should be taking advantage of. So if you're not getting value from your data, give us a call. We'd love to help you.
We are of the same view. Yeah, you can call us and I'll call David. It'll work out great. Like, thank you for taking the cycles to walk everybody through it. And I appreciate you spending the time with me saying silly stuff. That's right.
My pleasure.
Thanks a bunch. All right, everybody. Toodles.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @CloudandClear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.